But here's the lead story this morning. The EFF is calling for a new statement of intent on the Government of National Unity, which excludes the DA and the Freedom Front Plus. This call comes as discussions to form a seventh administration are being impacted by ideological differences and demands for cabinet positions. Various parties, including the DA, the IFP, the Freedom Front Plus and the Patriotic Alliance, have already signed the pact to join the Government of National Unity with the ANC, but the EFF wants an agreement anchored on equality. And the Deputy President of the Economic Freedom Fighters is now joining us in studio, Floyd Shivambu. Floyd, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning, and good morning to viewers of Newzroom Afrika.
You may have seen the Sunday papers indicating that there is a deal in place. The Federal Executive of the Democratic Alliance meeting today. You haven't seen it?
No, I have not seen that. But also, I don't operate like that. We don't operate on unofficial communication of decisions. We operate strictly on the official communication of the issues that we're dealing with. So if we have communicated and written a letter to the ANC as to what we propose should happen, we only deal with what they will write back to us. We do not operate on behalf of, on the basis of leaked documents and leaked discussions. We operate on official information because we're an organization that is self-respecting and take ourselves very serious. So everything else that we deal with is official information, not what is in the newspapers.
Yeah. So does that mean that the EFF is still hopeful that your proposal could find fertile ground within the ANC?
Look, we have written a letter to the ANC following our meeting, which we held on Friday, to talk about our proposal that there should be a government that must be constituted for the seventh administration here in South Africa. And then that government should exclude the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus, but all other parties that can easily associate with the values and foundational principles that are contained in the Freedom Charter, but also can pursue redress policies and legislation, but also will associate with progressive internationalism, which is basically to say we should fight on the same side as the Global South. We must reaffirm our participation in BRICS plus countries now, and we must oppose imperialism. That is basically what we had said should be done, constitute a government and moving forward. And we even said, by the way, that if the ANC is not convinced that the EFF is a preferred partner, it can go ahead and constitute the minority government outside of the EFF, but they must definitely not work with the Democratic Alliance and Freedom Front Plus. That is the principal position that we communicated.
Yeah. But do you believe that this proposal will find fertile ground?
Look, remember, it's not an issue of belief now. It's an issue of we've articulated our views.
Okay, let me
ask
you
a sensible view. Yeah, okay.
Let me ask it this way. What necessitated the meeting, the Friday meeting?
No,
because when we spoke, it was almost clear that you don't want to be part of the Government of National Unity, of course, and it almost seems that this is a new proposal that you are putting forward. So what necessitated the Friday meeting? Because it almost seemed as though that you've given up.
No.
That you know that there's going to be this coalition, as you called it, between the Democratic Alliance and the EFF.
So when we last spoke, we had two meetings with the African National Congress, and the ANC had not come back to us because they were still grappling with the definition of what they call a government of national unity. And then when we're now constituting parliament, and then actually we're in Cape Town, we're finalizing the constitutive meetings of a parliament in terms of how the committees are going to be composited and a variety of other things. And the ANC reached out to us to say that we can now meet to make follow-up on the first two meetings that we had before. And then we went there with a very comprehensive, sensible proposition that let's constitute government, because Parliament cannot function optimally without a government that is in place, because you cannot be able to constitute committees, you cannot pass budget votes, and you cannot allocate, you cannot involve yourself in the appropriation process, which is about allocation of resources for different functions of the state. Then we had said that let's constitute government, but let's do so without a Democratic Alliance, because it doesn't help. You must not be beholden to the Democratic Alliance, which is making irrational demands. We then said that we don't have to be part of that government as the EFF, but we cannot hold you at ransom like the DA is doing to you currently. That is basically what we're communicating.
So what was the attitude of the ANC? Why were they meeting you?
The meeting was to discuss what is to be done now, because remember, there is not yet an agreement as far as we're concerned.
Did they have a proposal? After the two meetings that you had, there was no proposal?
There's no proposal.
So it was just a follow-up meeting?
Yeah, there's no proposal that came from the ANC, but it appears that the ANC wants to invite everyone else on the basis of a statement of intent which was co-signed by Helen Zille and the Secretary General of the ANC, Comrade Fikile Mbalula. And we say to the ANC that we cannot be signatory to a DA-ANC alliance, because what is being constituted now is a grand coalition between the African National Congress and the DA. That is why everyone else who joins into that marriage, into that arrangement, just signs that the same statement of intent. And then we then say that let's constitute a government that is not based on this statement of intent. Let's draft clear principles that necessarily must include the Freedom Charter, the commitment to redress, and progressive internationalism. That is what we had said. And of course, we even expanded to say that a president must still retain the prerogative to constitute the executive according to what he believes or deems will be the most suitable individuals to occupy certain roles. What we also even clarified something which is apparently was part of the demands of the Democratic Alliance, that we do not agree on sealed mandates. Sealed mandates is a situation where a department does not account to the collective or doesn't account to a president, but only accounts to the political party which represents the person who is the minister or a deputy minister. We say that we don't agree to that. There must be a collective mandate, an agenda. There must be systems that have a unitary and solid government that operates seamlessly without any contradictions, without different directions that must be pursued. That is basically what we got to communicate, and we think is a sensible thing to do. And our emphasis is that we are not desperate for positions. We're not there to go and beg for positions. We said that constitute government. You do not have to appoint us if you think we're not suitable, but don't be beholden, don't be held at ransom by a racist organization, the Democratic Alliance, which is about protection of white supremacy and white privilege, which was gained through apartheid and colonialism.
And then the decision behind releasing this letter or the email that was sent to the General Secretary of the ANC, was it to tell the public that this is what we have proposed, this is the meeting that took place, this is what we have put on the table? So, it does sound, some would say, for instance, if you speak about the sealed mandates and the Democratic Alliance is proposing that there must be sealed mandates, that you are saying that no, we're opposed to a sealed mandate, which perhaps makes it a bit more lucrative compared to what the Democratic Alliance is proposing. Therefore, putting it to the public to say that this is what we are saying we are offering, and the ANC is seemingly rejecting us.
No, actually, let me give you the proper context so that you have a better understanding, and all the viewers have. So we had 2 meetings with the ANC, and we picked up that on the follow-up interviews which the ANC leaders, different leaders, did post the 2 meetings with the EFF, they had multiple, even contradictory interpretations of what we said in the meetings. And those meetings were recorded. We actually said that this is not secret meetings. Even the meeting that we held now with the ANC, we said that this is not a secret meeting. We're going to record everything else that we say in this meeting. And then after that, we then wrote down to say that what we said in the meeting orally, now we're going to write it down so that there are no multiple interpretations. Actually, the letter commences by stating that we are writing to you following our meeting so that there are no multiple interpretations of what we said. And then we then got to summarize the contents of what we had verbally communicated in the meeting. So the purpose was to make sure that there's clarity of what we had said, because we're not engaged in some elite pacting. We're not engaged in some secret negotiations which are hidden from the public. That is why we then took a decision that we must make this letter public. And even before we did that, we informed the leadership of the ANC. We wrote to the Secretary General, to the Deputy Secretary General, actually both the Deputy Secretaries General of the ANC to say that we are going to make this letter public because we think that the people of South Africa deserve to know as to what is being discussed in the process of constituting the 7th democratic administration here in our country.
In the email that you sent to the Secretary General, you also say that we give our assurance and guarantee that we shall never work with the DA in any sphere of government to remove the ANC from power where it is elected as leader of the executive or legislature. What does this mean?
So, do you know what we had picked up is that the DA's arrogant and irrational, disrespectful demands to the African National Congress was on a gun pointed on its head that if you don't comply with our demands, we're going to possibly try to mobilize the other opposition parties and take you out of government. So we're making that commitment that we are not going to collaborate with the Democratic Alliance to remove an ANC government because they're making extremely disrespectful demands. Like they want to take the entire executive. At some stage, they were demanding to lead 12 ministries, fire all the directors general, and have deputy ministers, have deputy president, and occupy anything else that is of strategic value in South Africa's society because they possibly were treating the ANC from a point of it being a disparate organization. Then we say to them that don't be disparate. There is no one who is going to, despite the fact that he didn't get 50% plus one, but you got 40%, there's no one who is going to now make irrational and unreasonable demands on the basis that the EFF is going to collaborate for your removal. That is the commitment that we're making in that point.
Is this commitment not to say that we're also going to shield you from accountability? For instance, you guys have gone to the Constitutional Court on the Pala issue. If that matter does go back to Parliament, the EFF essentially saying that, listen, we will ensure that we will not remove the ANC from power where it is elected as leader of the executive or legislature. What does it mean?
So part of what is said in that letter is that we are committing to constitute a government that is based on transparency and fighting against corruption, is based on the rule of law as well. So you can't say now because, like, for political reasons. What we're saying is that we're not going to opportunistically utilize politics to want to remove you irrationally. But if someone does something wrong, why would you fold your arms? Like if people go and loot state resources and then they involve themselves in crime, if there is a revelation, constitutional revelation or illustration that people have committed crimes before, we will still hold them accountable. We can't make a commitment. It will also be unlawful for us to make a commitment that even when the law and the processes have revealed that someone has done something wrong, we can't do anything about that. That we are going to act on. But what we are making a commitment on is that no one must put a gun on your head and say that if you don't give me 12 ministries, give me the entire government, I'm going to collaborate with the EFF to remove you. We are not going to form part of such a threat which the DA has been posing and is posing to the ANC.
So this is a protection of the executive at whichever level, whether it is local, provincial,
yes, for narrow political purposes, we will never participate in such.
Okay,
yes.
So we've spoken to the chairperson of the ANC, Panyaza Lesufu, who still hasn't announced his executive as well in Gauteng, and he says that part of the decision as well would be that whatever happens at a national level will also influence what happens at provincial level and then later on at a local government level as well. What's the EFF's position on that, considering, for instance, that you are co-governing with the ANC in metros such as Johannesburg as well as Ekurhuleni?
Look, we have said, by the way, to the leadership of the ANC in Gauteng that they must and they can go ahead and constitute an executive in Gauteng without the Democratic Alliance. The same commitment that we made to the national leadership that there's nothing which is going to happen. We are not going to collaborate with the DA to try to destabilize such a government. We've got a working relationship with the African National Congress here in Gauteng. We're co-governing in Mohale City, in Western District, in the city of Ekurhuleni, in the city of Johannesburg. And whenever there's points of differences, we reach out to each other and have deliberations, and then governance goes ahead. I mean, the EFF is leading here in the city of Johannesburg. And the departments which collectively employ upward of 40% of the entire employees of the city of Johannesburg, and there is maximum optimal stability that is happening in those departments, in public safety, in public health, even despite some of the issues of governance differences in terms of approach that occur in Ekurhuleni. By and large, there's optimal stability. There's stability in Mohale City where we're co-governing. So we are not going to pose any threat to the ANC in Gauteng or nationally about the destabilization of government because our positions have not been secured or have not been given cabinet positions. That is not our approach. Our approach is that we need to have a stable and sensible transition into the 7th administration, which is not characterized and underpinned by threats which the Democratic Alliance seems to be making to the ANC.
Your CIC had threatened to pull out those MMCs if there wasn't a deal. This is now on the Thursday evening before the MPs were sworn in. What happened?
So I think, remember there was a discussion which we were waiting for the ANC to come to us, back to us in terms of what should happen. And the leadership of the ANC had said that the discussions are still on the horizon, and we believed that. And that is why we even now got to be involved.
So you reneged on that because you believe
Because there was commitment that there's still going to be deliberations as to just what do we do moving forward. So
what happens if the agreement goes ahead now? What happens if the agreement goes ahead without the EFF?
Look, we are going to oppose. We did say in the letter as well that if the DA-ANC alliance goes ahead, we're going to oppose it with everything humanly possible. We're going to oppose
from the opposition benches.
From the opposition benches.
But what happens in the municipalities where you're co-governing with the ANC, where your CIC had threatened to pull out? What happens to that?
Yeah, so if the leadership of the ANC in Gauteng and in the regions, or in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Eastern Cape, in the Free State, if they say that they don't want to work with the EFF, the EFF will gladly withdraw from those governments. And remember, by the way, that...
So now it's going to be based on them. They would have to take the decision.
No, you must understand this context first, that the agreements which we had to constitute government with the ANC in Gauteng, in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Free State, in the Eastern Cape, was not an agreement between the national leaderships of the EFF and the ANC. It was leadership with the provincial leadership. In terms of what got to happen, the national leadership of the ANC has never got to agree with the EFF in terms of constituting government anywhere in South Africa. So that's why I'm saying that if the provincial leadership of those respective provinces is of the view that they want to now filter down the grand coalition between the ANC and the DA to the local state, we'll gladly accept that.
Has Paul Mashatile ever reached out to you?
No, we've never. Like, the ANC has designated a delegation that is busy with negotiations. And all the negotiations that we have is open negotiations, official process. We don't do underground talk and corner talks. We talk over the table things that we're willing to repeat in public. So there's no any discussion with any other leader of the ANC except those that have been designated by the ANC to talk about this question.
Do you know about a split within the ANC-NEC where there are those that are in support of the ANC working with the EFF as well as the MK party, and those who are opposed to that, saying that rather go the Democratic Alliance route? And we are told that the heads of both of these is one is Paul Mashatile, the deputy president, and his supporters who are pushing for EFF-MK deal, and the president and his supporters who are pushing for a Democratic Alliance deal.
Look, like in any other normal organization, I'm sure that there would be different interpretations and understanding of just how do you handle conjunctural issues. Like this issue of the ANC losing 50% plus one is happening for the first time at national level. They, of course, will have different approaches depending on their ideological dispositions, sometimes even private interest, as to how they interpret certain questions. What we are dealing with ourselves is to treat the ANC that here is our proposal to the entire ANC so that they do not have deliberations with a false view that the only option that they have now is to work with the Democratic Alliance. We have presented a clear framework that is based on the Freedom Charter, that is based on progressive internationalism, that is based on the principle of redress. And we're saying that you can pursue alternate options. You are not beholden to the Democratic Alliance. So we, of course, will contribute to what the ANC gets to deliberate. We're not interested in the internal dynamics of the ANC, but we know that they obviously cannot be homogeneous in terms of how they approach this question.
Okay. In your email as well, you speak about the 66%, that essentially when you look at progressive parties as you describe them,
yes,
you make up about 66%. That's about two-thirds majority, right?
Yes.
It's about the two-thirds majority.
Yeah, the context of that, by the way, which we said in the meeting and which we can repeat as well, is we said that we think that politically what the ANC should have done immediately after elections when they realized that at 40%, their inclination should have been towards the reunification of the liberation forces, of forces that still ascribe to the Freedom Charter, of forces that still believe that there is a historical mission to conclude here in South Africa. And those constitute more than 66% in the current parliament. So if you combine what the ANC has what MK has, what the EFF has, what UDM has, what the National Coloured Congress has as well, it's a solid foundation of formations that literally got to move out of the African National Congress. So instead of an attempt to reunite the liberation forces, the ANC thus far seems to be choosing the right-wing forces which represent a counter-revolutionary agenda. So that is the agenda
wasn't that the intention? Wasn't that the intention of the letter also?
In terms of what?
To again, as I said a bit earlier, and say to the public that these are the options that we've put forward to the ANC. It's not true, as you said a bit earlier on, that there's only one other available option, that there are alternatives. That was the intention of the letter. That
is the intention, to say that like there are options and which are far much more politically sound alternatives, and not the confusion which is going to be constituted with the Democratic Alliance. And we don't think that there's any political sound basis to constitute a government with the DA. And what is even said, Aldrin, is that the DA is not having an alliance with the ANC. It's having an alliance with President Cyril Ramaphosa. Helen Zille says that minus Ramaphosa, we're not going to work with these people. She says that Ramaphosa must give us the Ministry of Justice so that we can appoint the National Director of Public Prosecutions and arrest the rest of the remaining leaders of the ANC, inclusive of Paul Mashatile, Gwede Mantashe, Fikile Mbalula, everyone. So, like, that is the absolute truth, that the Democratic Alliance has got no respect of the organization ANC. They just interacting with it because of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, whom they think they've got control over. I don't know why they think so, or maybe they do have, but that is the foundation. And Mr. Ramaphosa won't be the head of state, won't be president of the ANC for the next 5 years, by the way. So even the foundational composition of this ANC-DA alliance, because it's based on the fact that there's Mr. Ramaphosa there, it's not going to be a durable foundation. But if a foundation of a relationship is based on sound, clear principles, such can be sustainable beyond the individuals who lead such a program.
Yeah. Let me quickly ask you about KZN. You know, of course, the MK party won about 45% of the vote there, yet it is IFP, the DA, as well as the ANC and the NFP that are co-governing in that province. Has the EFF met with the MK party as yet to say that what other plan can you come up with to try and, I don't know,
no, look, we have met with,
power?
we have met with Mkhondo Wesizwe party, and we said that Mkhondo Wesizwe party should lead the government of KwaZulu-Natal. That is our position. That is why even in the constitutive meetings of the legislature of KwaZulu-Natal, we voted together with Mkhondo Wesizwe party, because we think that they should be given the right to lead the
Is there a strategy to go there, to get there though?
So look, the issue is how do we deliberate on all of these issues? If there's a sound agreement between ourselves and the ANC and other parties, we'll still pursue a perspective and view that Mkhondo Wesizwe party should lead the government of KwaZulu-Natal because, I mean, they got 46% of the vote, and then the second party got 18%. And the one which has got 18% is leading all the strategic ministries in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I think that has to be reversed. And then Mkhonto is a party.
Is there a strategy to get there, though?
And, remember that has to be foundationally pursued by Mkhonto as a party. I don't speak on behalf of MKP. Mkhonto as a party should come with a framework and say, who else do we engage to make sure that we constitute government in the province of KwaZulu-Natal? We have already pledged our solidarity and support to such a government. So Mkhonto as a party must take leadership and say, who else do we invite into a government in KwaZulu-Natal? And then we'll take it from there.
Okay, we have this clip quickly from Mmusi Maimane, the leader of BOSA. Just quickly listen to what he has to say. Okay, let's see if we have the clip there from the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane. Okay, we have it now. Okay, let's quickly hear it.
I think these issues we should rather than sitting around going, this party is a black party or a white party. I think that's a misnomer. I think we have a problem of whiteness broadly, if you want to talk about a superior attitude. Then if a party wants to bring that to the attitude, that is not something that is given to a particular party. And a particular individual can bring that. So for me, if we leave that at the door and say, how do we work for all South Africans? And that's an invitation to black and white South Africans to work towards that ideal. I think we can participate together. And in my engagement, even with parties like the Freedom Front Plus, I found them, even though they represent Afrikaner South Africans, have never said that must come at the expense of black South Africans as an argument. So that is a basis upon which we would engage them on a plan to say, how do we deliver for South Africa?
Your response to that?
I don't know what he's saying, honestly. Like, I struggle most of the time to hear coherence from Mr. Maimane. Would you respect I don't know what he's saying. What I know is that there are political parties in South Africa that represents white supremacy and the protection of white privilege, which was gained through colonialism and apartheid. And those include the Freedom Front Plus, those include the Democratic Alliance. That is why, despite the falsehood which the DA campaigns through, that wherever they govern, everything else is better. Go to the Western Cape, the poorest of the poor, the highest decay of urban poverty is found in the Western Cape under the Democratic Alliance. And that is where the black majority and Africans in particular reside. The highest levels of violent crime, a lot of things that are happening where they govern, but they will go on national scale and say, well, we govern better because they, of course, provide services to the white minority wherever they are found. And by the way, it's not us only who make that observation. When Herman Mashaba was a DA mayor here in Johannesburg, he says that these people are saying, I must neglect the poorest of the poor, I must only focus on rich people's areas, which is white people's areas. And that is what the DA is all about. There are political parties that are about the protection of the undue white supremacy and privilege in South Africa, and those cannot be associated with. And the Freedom Front Plus is still stuck in the apartheid conservative ideas of Afrikanerdom. That is why they want the secession of Orania, which we never agree with. They're still narrowly defined by those interests that must be rejected with the contempt it deserves.
Is the EFF attending the opening of Parliament on the 18th of July?
Look, we are going to participate in the opening of Parliament. Like we are already in the process. This past week we attended the programming committee, the rules committee, the chief whips forum. On Tuesday we are going to be having the National Assembly in Parliament to nominate members of Parliament to external fora like the Judicial Services Commission, to the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the Pan-African Parliament, and other bodies where we have to send delegation to as the EFF. We are fully participating in the constitutive meetings of Parliament, and we're going to participate optimally and fully and effectively. Yeah. We're an organization that has been elected to be in Parliament. That is what we're going to do If we go to government, we'll go to government. If we don't, we'll continue to play the role that we have been designated by the people of South Africa.
And you're ready to go to government as well and co-govern with the ANC?
Yeah, we are more than ready. Like government, that if there's one thing that we'll do with utmost excellence is government. If there's something that we're going to do with utmost discipline and dedication and responsiveness is government, is to constitute government of South Africa, because we know what the aspirations and interests of our people are. And
your preferences have changed now as well?
Look, we've never, by the way, like, and I think this must be on record, there's never been a time where the EFF went to an official discussion and said that we're looking for these following positions.
Well, that's what your CIC said.
There's never been a meeting.
So he said that publicly, but never said it in a meeting.
So look, this is what the Commander-in-Chief and President correctly said in a radio interview, that he would prefer me to be Minister of Finance because of the experience that I've gained in the Standing Committee on Finance, and perhaps maybe the other additional qualities and qualifications that we have will add a lot of value, because like there's been consistency in terms of how we got to interpret certain legislation. And of course, if he had been elected as President of South Africa, he possibly was going to designate me into that role. But it has never been a negotiation demand of the EFF that Floyd Shivambu must be a Minister of Finance or everything else must collapse. Yep. That is not a demand of the EFF.
Does this include the positions for the subcommittees in Parliament, or parliamentary committees?
It's not.
But that was said publicly, though, in the press briefing. That
so in the what we said as well we said that the ANC can constitute government, and then we can occupy chairpersons of different committees in Parliament,
including a speaker.
And then he said, preferably, we can occupy the Standing Committee on Finance chairpersonship, and that we should be forming part of the presiding officers as well, Speaker or Deputy Speaker, in terms of what is required.
So was that said in a meeting?
No, it has never been.
Because that's the thing, right?
There's never been.
The other day we were speaking to Mtumsen Ntuli, the chief whip of the ANC, and he says that, one of the strangest things about the EFF is that the leader of the EFF says something different in a public fora, but yet during the meeting, what we hear is something completely different to what the EFF leader said publicly.
I don't think there's any disjuncture between what the president and what says and what we say. There is utmost consistency. So this is the principle that we hold in terms of how leadership of government must be constituted. One is that whoever is the head of state and president should have the prerogative to constitute a cabinet collective, and of course must check with the leadership of different political parties, because he might not know everyone in the political parties that he wants to designate certain roles to. And that is the principle that we have got to constitute. But we have never done what the Democratic Alliance is doing. Obviously, we want trade and industry, we want finance.
Okay, let me ask you this way then. What's the EFF's preference if the ANC was to accede to the proposal that you're making?
So in the letter which we wrote to the ANC, and what we said as well in the official meeting, we say that in the consideration of constituting the 7th administration, that the EFF should be considered for all the clusters, like to play whatever role, either as head of ministries or even deputies, if there is such a consideration. So there's different clusters of cabinet: the economic cluster, security cluster, social cluster, and all of those clusters. And we say that there must be consideration of all the clusters, so that there is a broad representation of the EFF in all the clusters of the executive. That is basically what we said, but we never mentioned any specific portfolio.
So you don't have a preference?
We can
What's
participate.
Your preference?
No, we can participate meaningfully in
your
all
preference
the
is not a demand. I'm just asking, what's your preference?
No, we can add value in all the departments that we can be given. In the economic cluster and everything, we can add meaningful value in all of them. We do not want to give any precondition in terms of how such must be considered.
Are you still hopeful, though?
In terms of what?
The ANC agreeing to this?
I don't think it operates like that, though, by the way. Yeah. It's a principled discussion. It doesn't work like that. So we have made our point clear. The ANC has got the right to discuss and make its own consideration. It's not an issue of faith. It's not lottery. We're not playing lottery. We
But you do these things with an intention, right? There is an intention behind it to reach a specific goal.
It's not like we have chosen numbers and then we think that, no, when they spin the ball, it's going to come in this particular direction. We have made a principled submission as to what we think should constitute a government of South Africa, and then the ANC must logically and sensibly go and consider such and come back to us. If they are of the view that what we propose is not workable, we'll accept that.
If they say come, but unfortunately the DA and the Freedom Front Plus, as members of the GNU, still remain,
no, we will
say
not.
no?
Yeah, we will not participate. If the DA and the Freedom Front Plus are a part of a government, we are not going to co-govern with the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus. And we also say that we encourage that even if the ANC believes that the EFF is not a preferred co-government political party, it must never ever co-govern with the Democratic Alliance, because it is going to reverse even some of the little progress that has been made in the past 30 years.